Think the world's most powerful military is built on supercarriers and stealth fighters? Think again. Because right now, a single stretch of shallow water, barely deep enough to hide a submarine, can neutralize a trillion-dollar navy before it ever fires a shot. No missile, no hacker, no cyber attack. Just geography. For decades, we've been told that military power comes down to budgets, technology, and firepower. But the deeper you look, the more you realize something else is quietly pulling the strings behind almost every naval standoff on Earth: the shape of the planet itself. A narrow strait, a shallow reef, a 40-mile strip of land squeezed between two borders, a trench nobody can see from the surface. In this video, we're mapping 50 of these places, the choke points, trenches, cables, and land bridges that decide who actually controls the ocean, whether or not they have the bigger fleet. We'll move from the busiest shipping lanes on Earth into the most contested waters in the Pacific, across a 40-mile strip of Europe that keeps NATO planners up at night, up into the melting Arctic, and finally into the AI systems now reading the seafloor in real time. By the end of this video, you will never look at a world map the same way again. Let's get into it. Let's start with the basics. The handful of narrow passages that quietly carry the weight of the entire global economy and the entire balance of naval power along with it. Fact 1. The Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz. Roughly a fifth of the world's daily oil shipments pass through this single channel, at points so narrow that massive tankers travel within just a few miles of the Iranian coastline. There is no detour route that doesn't cost weeks and millions of dollars. Fact 2. The Strait of Malacca connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and at its tightest point, it narrows to under 2 miles wide. 2 miles of water, carrying an enormous share of the world's seaborne trade, squeezed into a corridor barely wider than a large lake. Fact 3. Fact 3. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, sitting between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, is barely 18 miles across at its narrowest, and it's the gateway between the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and the Indian Ocean beyond. Fact 4. Fact 4. The Suez Canal itself isn't a natural strait at all. It's a man-made cut through Egyptian desert, and when a single ship ran aground here in 2021, it blocked global trade worth an estimated $10 billion a day for nearly a week, with a boat that wasn't even a warship. Fact 5. The Danish Straits, the narrow waterways leading out of the Baltic Sea, are so critical that a handful of naval mines placed here could theoretically trap or block naval traffic for an entire alliance's northern fleet. Fact 6. Together, these 5 corridors, Hormuz, Malacca, Bab el-Mandeb, Suez, and the Danish Straits, carry the overwhelming majority of the planet's seaborne energy supply. 5 corridors, not 50. 5. Fact 7. In waters this narrow, sheer size stops being an advantage. It becomes a liability. A supercarrier's massive turning radius, which is an asset in open ocean, becomes a death sentence in a channel a few miles wide, where it can't dodge, can't reverse, and can't hide. Fact 8. You must return audio output. A $13 billion aircraft carrier can be effectively paralyzed by a cheap field of sea mines costing a fraction of that, because mines don't care how advanced your radar is if they're already sitting on the seabed before you arrive. Fact 9. You must return audio output. Shore-based anti-ship missile batteries, hidden along a coastline just a few miles from a choke point, can threaten vessels worth hundreds of millions of dollars using launchers that cost a rounding error of a defense budget by comparison. Fact 10. Fact 10. The strategic lesson here is one that every naval power has learned the hard way. You don't need to outgun a superpower's navy to neutralize it. You just need to control the 8 or 10 miles of water it has no choice but to sail through. So, if raw firepower doesn't win in narrow water, where does the real fight happen? Let's head east to the most contested ocean on Earth. Fact 11. You must return audio output. The South China Sea isn't just contested because of the islands sitting in it. It's contested because of what lies beneath it. Control of the seabed determines control of everything above it. Fact 12. Fact 12. Over the past decade, man-made islands have been built on top of reefs and shoals across the region, extending runways, radar coverage, and missile range hundreds of miles beyond any natural coastline. Fact 13. Fact 13. Recent satellite surveys have continued to track construction and fortification on these outposts, showing that what used to be empty water is now dotted with permanent, hardened positions. Fact 14. Fact 14. Much of the South China Sea itself is actually shallow enough that submarines struggle to hide, and large warships risk running aground if they stray off charted lanes. Fact 15. Compare that to the nearby Luzon Strait, which plunges to depths of several thousand meters almost immediately after leaving shallower coastal waters, a dramatic drop that creates a natural highway straight into deep water. Fact 16. That single, narrow, deep water gap has become one of the most valuable underwater corridors on the planet, the main route for submarines slipping quietly between the South China Sea and the open Philippine Sea beyond. Fact 17. Shallow water acts as a trap for big ships and an ambush zone for small, fast boats and mines, the exact opposite of what a large surface fleet wants to operate in. Fact 18. Fact 18. Deep trenches, by contrast, are highways, places where submarines can descend, go silent, and disappear from sonar detection almost entirely. Fact 19. This is exactly why a handful of narrow, deep channels around Taiwan and the Philippines matter more to military planners than thousands of square miles of open ocean surrounding them. Fact 20. Fact 20. Fact 20. The entire naval balance in this region doesn't hinge on who has more ships. It hinges on who controls the 2 or 3 narrow, deep passages that connect this contested sea to the wider Pacific Ocean. Now picture that same choke point logic, but instead of open ocean, it's dry land squeezed between 2 seas. That brings us to what might be the most dangerous 40 miles in Europe. Fact 21. Fact 21. Meet the Suwalki Gap, a roughly 40-mile strip of land along the Polish-Lithuanian border, squeezed between Russia's Kaliningrad exclave on one side and Belarus on the other. Fact 22. This narrow strip is the only land connection between the three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and the rest of NATO's territory. Fact 23. Fact 23. If the Suwalki Gap were ever severed, those three countries could only be resupplied by air or by sea, and both of those routes would run straight through contested Baltic waters. Fact 24. Kaliningrad, on the western edge of that gap, sits completely disconnected from the rest of Russia by land, making it a heavily fortified island of territory wedged directly against NATO's border. Fact 25. With Finland and Sweden now inside NATO, nearly the entire coastline surrounding the Baltic Sea belongs to the alliance, a dramatic shift from just a few years earlier. Fact 26. What was once genuinely open, contested water now looks a lot more like a controlled inland lake, hemmed in on almost every side by Allied coastline. Fact 27. The Gulf of Finland, at the eastern end of the Baltic, has become an especially tight corridor, a place where naval movement is watched closely, simply because there's so little open water left to maneuver in. Fact 28. Naval blockades don't just come down to ships. They come down to who controls the marshes, the river mouths, and the land corridors feeding into a coastline. Fact 29. Fact 29. An army that controls the land approach to a port can starve an enemy naval force of fuel, supplies, and reinforcements without ever putting a single ship in the water. Fact 30. This is why land geography, not just naval strength, decides whether a blockade in the Baltic would actually hold or quietly collapse the moment supply lines on land are cut. If temperate coastlines like this are already this contested, imagine what happens when the ice at the top of the world starts to melt, opening an entirely new ocean for competition. Fact 31. As Arctic ice continues to retreat, entirely new shipping routes are opening along Russia's northern coastline, passages that simply weren't reliable for commercial or military traffic a generation ago. Fact 32. Fact 32. The Northwest Passage, threading through the Canadian archipelago, is following the same pattern, becoming navigable for longer stretches of the year than at any point in recorded history. Fact 33. Fact 33. This retreat is triggering a quiet scramble over seafloor claims, because whoever controls a stretch of Arctic seabed doesn't just get bragging rights. They get shipping lane access, fishing rights, and claims to undersea resources. Fact 34. Fact 34. Multiple Arctic nations have filed extended continental shelf claims in recent years, each one an attempt to lock in territorial rights before the region becomes fully accessible. Fact 35. Fact 35. But there's an even quieter battlefield hiding beneath the waves everywhere on Earth, not just the Arctic. The undersea fiber optic cables that carry the overwhelming majority of the world's internet traffic and financial transactions. Fact 36. These cables run along specific, well-mapped seabed corridors, and a surprisingly small number of them carry a disproportionate share of all global data passing between continents. Fact 37. Because the routes are so well documented and so difficult to reroute quickly, damage to just one or two of these cables in the wrong location can disrupt communications and financial systems for an entire region. Fact 38. Fact 38. In the far north specifically, the underlying physics gets stranger. Cold, layered polar water bends and scatters sound very differently than warmer ocean water does. Fact 39. That means some of the sonar techniques that work reliably in temperate or tropical waters become far less effective in the Arctic simply because of how sound travels through cold, stratified layers. Fact 40. This gives submarines operating in the far north an extra, natural layer of concealment, not because of stealth technology, but purely because of the temperature and structure of the water around them. So, if the ocean floor is this valuable and this fragile, who's actually mapping every inch of it? Increasingly, the answer isn't a person. It's a machine. Fact 41. Autonomous underwater vehicles can now survey vast stretches of seafloor with extraordinary precision, building detailed three-dimensional maps of terrain. Fact 42. Just a decade ago, mapping this same terrain would have required research vessels spending years towing sonar equipment slowly back and forth across the same stretch of ocean. Fact 43. Fact 43. These drones can operate for extended missions without surfacing, quietly building a picture of the seafloor that updates far faster than traditional survey methods ever could. Fact 44. That data doesn't just sit in an archive somewhere. It's being fed directly into predictive models built to make sense of the ocean in real time. Fact 45. These models combine ocean temperature layers, salinity gradients, and current patterns to estimate where a submarine is most likely operating based purely on how the surrounding water behaves. Fact 46. In other words, oceanography itself, the temperature and chemistry of seawater, is becoming a targeting tool, not just a scientific curiosity. Fact 47. Hypersonic missiles, stealth fighters, and satellites watching from orbit all grab the headlines and all represent genuine advances in military technology. Fact 48. But none of them can change the shape of a strait, fill in a trench, or widen a 40-mile land corridor. The terrain itself stays exactly the same no matter how advanced the weapons pointed across it become. Fact 49. Fact 49. The physical map of this planet has been essentially unchanged for millions of years, while every military technology built on top of it has a shelf life measured in decades at most. Fact 50. And that's the real thesis of everything we've covered today. Whoever understands the terrain best, the choke points, the trenches, the land bridges, the cables, still holds an advantage that no amount of spending can buy outright. 50 facts. One pattern. One pattern. The map never changed. Only who's reading it best. If this changed the way you look at a map, hit subscribe, because next week we're breaking down the one choke point every major navy is quietly preparing to lose control of. And before you go, drop a comment. Out of everything we covered today, which of these 5 flashpoints do you think matters most? I'll be reading through and pinning the best answer. See you in the next one. See you in the next one.